I'm on a mission to uncover the most elusive and mysterious pieces of cut content in Borderlands history. I'm not referring to things you've probably seen 1,000 times before. I'm talking about information as rare as a unicorn. Stuff that you've potentially never seen before. And today, we're uncovering the mystery of Grotto P. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. Around the launch period of Borderlands 3, leaks were circulating very frequently, and one of the leaks that circulated was, to my knowledge, started by a YouTuber named Haderhype. Hader would post a video claiming that DLC 2 for Borderlands 3 has been leaked, and it's all about the barman and the second stars. In this video, he would showcase audio files that were data mined by another data miner named Cruddy Borderlands Theories. The leaks for this DLC would detail a group of people called the Second Star. The running plot was that this group believed that anything they thought was true would come true in real life, and as part of this they would take on various phony activities like paying with fake cash at a bar to try and get free drink, although of course to them they thought the money was real. Now, I'm not going to play for you all of the audio that was released because there's just so much of it and most of it has already been heard by a lot of people in the community, and this is Borderlands Unseen. I want to show you guys stuff that hasn't been seen, but to give you some extra context, I will play some of the audio files that were found inside of the game file.
That's Cal's workshop. Spends most of his time there. See if he left any clues as to where he might have gone. Doom! The ashen taste of doom is upon my tongue, and it was I who mixed its foul cocktail. Will you help me, wandering stranger? The Second Stars have been running their recruitment at the old doll silo by the docks. Those corporate bunkers are nearly impenetrable. You'll have to convince them you want to join up. Here, this should get you in. I kicked them all out after they settled their tabs with this bogus cash. They looked at me like I was the crazy one. They believed it was real money. Use that as an entry fee and they'll think it's a mountain of cash.
No one has that much money lying around. You're one of those fakey fake vault thieves. Application unaccepted. You want to get to me, you gotta go through imagination trials. Our boss man is a real vault hunter and he designed it himself. The last trial is the Thresher of Bravery. Boss man says Second Stars aren't afraid of nothing. Not like scaredy cat vault hunters.
Now, there's a few things that are important to note about this audio. First of all, this is not the final voice actors, or presumably so. When we're talking about cut content, we are usually talking about things that just did not make it to the point where they could get into the game. So it is highly likely that the audio you heard was just placeholder done by some of the writers or employees at Gearbox until they finally got voice actors for it. But there are some other things to note in that audio which we'll be using to base our conclusion in this video off of. The main one is that in that audio we hear that there are going to be Threshers in this DLC. Now, while we don't know if they are real or not, although I believe they are not real, it is interesting to hear that there were going to be Threshers as a concept in this supposed DLC. Now, this alone gives us a good estimate of where this DLC would take place. A lot of people would suggest that this was going to take place on a new planet, a new complete separate part of the game, much like the other DLCs did. However, for the involvement of Threshers alone, I'm going to say that this took place on Pandora. And I know some of you in the comments might be saying, Epic, that's such a stretch, you can't just say it takes place on Pandora because of Threshers, they could have migrated to Eden 6 or hell, even Necrotafeo. But there are two things I want to point out. First of all, this is not a living Thresher, in my mind at least, so I don't think it would matter too much. And also, I've got an ace up my sleeve which you might just want to see. For a long time, so many people thought that this was just that, a cut DLC in Borderlands 3 that was supposed to come out but they scrapped it and maybe went with Kriegs or Bounty of Blood. But I don't think that's the case at all, and I'm going to show you some proof to back this up. So, firstly, for Exhibit A, why do I believe this is not a DLC? Well, take a look at the files right here. We can see right at the bottom of the list, if you focus your eyes, Zone Grotto. Now, I'm going to come back to what Zone Grotto is later. Of course, this is the mystery of Grotto_P, but I just want you to remember that this is not in a DLC directory. Zone Grotto is up there along with other stuff like Desert, which is a Pandora location, Desolate, which is Necrotafeo, other places like Zone Beach, which is also Necrotafeo, and also Atlas HQ, which we know is Promethea. So from this alone, I am going to say 110% this was not a DLC but a base game location. If it was DLC, I don't think it would have ever been included in the list of maps and planets that were going to be in the base game. Now I know that someone's going to say, well, what if they just meant to have this as a DLC and they were developing it before launch and it just got left in there? Well, I don't think this is actually reliable at all, because if that were the case, I think we'd more likely see something like the Handsome Jackpot in there as well, but that's just simply not the case. Now, moving on, why do I think this is on Pandora and not on a new location like another DLC would be? Well, keep your eyes on this image, but this time I want you to check out the top of the list. Now, we can see that before these locations at the top of the list, it says planet. Anything else that is not a unique planetary location like the Pandora locations, Desolate locations and more, say zone. However, for stuff like the Proving Grounds, which are unique planets that you travel to, these are prefixed with planet. But this is not the case at the bottom of the list with Zone Grotto, which makes me think that them mentioning Threshers and also have it being here without the planet prefix, this is not a planet, a new planet at all. It is a zone within Pandora. But that's not all, because you might be wondering, okay, Epic, this is all well and good, but how do we know for sure that this was on Pandora? How do we know for sure that it wasn't DLC? Well, I have some more things to show you guys, which if you're not convinced already, I think you may be after checking this out. Once again, within the base game locations, we can also find something called static mesh _ zone map mesh _ grotto. This is once again in reference to the map Grotto _P, which we're going to be talking about soon. But what exactly is a zone map mesh? Well, a zone map mesh is very simply put, when you open your map in Borderlands 3, you get that 3D top-down overview of the map where you can see where the vendors are, vehicle stations, and more. A zone map mesh is generated for these maps when the map is done, so that you can do exactly that. Look at the map. So we know that a zone map mesh for Grotto exists, but there is even more things I want to show you. Check this out right here. This looks very boring, but what is it? Well, it's the texture for zone map fog _ grotto. This is just yet another reference to the zone map mesh of Grotto for Grotto _ P. However, this isn't very fun to look at, and if you don't know what you're looking at here, then this is going to be nothing to you. So what if I showed you something a little more cool? Well, thanks to the help of Blender and Unreal Engine 5, I'm pleased to show you for the first time ever the official zone map mesh for the cut Grotto _ P map in all of its glory. If you're like me, you might be looking at this and thinking this looks very similar to a base game map, but from what I could see going through the game and checking every single zone map mesh, there is no match for this one. Also, it has a unique name of _grotto, which means I'm pretty sure this is a completely unique mesh that has not been seen before in Borderlands 3. This is just yet again another piece of evidence which is mounting up on what we believe is a cut location from the base game of Borderlands 3. However, I want to nail this down and find out exactly what we're talking about, and I have just the idea. Also, in the base game, we can find references in the files to zone map _ grotto, which it's important to note is not the same as zone map mesh _ grotto. This is what's actually going to hold most of the information on our zone map, like the locations we can go to. Now, one of the zone map sections in zone map _ grotto, as you can see here, is named Tavern. This is the only named location in zone map _ grotto, and the rest, as you can see below that one, is just section 2, and then it goes so on and so forth. This is because, of course, the map was unfinished, but we do have some information in that first section to go off of. We know that this was going to have a tavern, and we also know from listening to this audio earlier on in the video,
I kicked them all out after they settled their tabs with this bogus cash. They looked at me like I was the crazy one.
That there was going to be a bar where the barkeeper would get scammed by the second stars. So slowly but surely we are starting to narrow this down and crack the case on the unsolved mystery of Grotto _ P. But this is still all speculation until we actually see an image of this map in game, and we see that there's a bar in game, and we can see that this map is on Pandora in the game. how can we be sure that any of what we're saying is true? Well, thanks to Gearbox, we kinda have what we're looking for. When the Director's Cut DLC released as part of Season Pass 2, Gearbox released a ton of behind the scenes footage. And going into the game files, we can actually find the name for this footage behind every piece of content they put in that behind the scene. And what do you know? In the files, there is references to behind the scenes footage for Grotto. Now, I'm sure at some point or another you may have already seen what I'm showing you on screen here, but I think the most important thing to show you is these in-game screenshots of _Grotto, which shows that this map is on none other than Pandora. But it's not just this map being on Pandora which is important to point out here. Because what is that you can see just in the foreground? Well, it's a building, most notably called Hook, Line and Drinker, which I don't know about you, but that sounds like a bar to me. Additionally, in this concept art, we can see graffiti that says Vault of Truth and Belief. These things also match up to what the second stars say, that they can make anything come true based on what they believe. And in this very peculiar piece of concept art, we can see vault monsters, although they don't look like vault monsters, and it might make you think at first, is this just some poorly sketched up by a kid artwork that they were maybe going to use for the game? But I don't think that's the case at all, because the second stars are major frauds who want people to believe anything they believe so that they can get their way around the galaxy scamming people. I think this is what they were making people think they killed, that these are the vault monsters they were taking down. But of course, that one I would take with a grain of salt. Although, with everything else we've talked about, I don't think it's a major coincidence. This is all extremely fascinating stuff, because when we pair together everything we've talked about in this video, we basically have a clear, direct vision of what this was going to look like in-game. And we can also finally, after all of these years, nearly 4 years now, put to rest the rumor that this was going to be DLC. My friend, I am pretty sure this was just base game content that was cut from the game. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below and whether or not you agree with that. And thank you so much for watching this episode of Borderlands Unseen. On the next episode, I'm going to be cleaning up some loose ends and showing you guys some stuff which is pretty cool. Nothing as huge as this episode as we wind down to the more obscure details. Some cool stuff I think you might want to check out nonetheless. But with that said, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, and I hope it blew your mind as much as it did for me as well. And thank you guys so much for watching yet again. I'll check you all in the next one.